في لحظات التأمل الصادقة فقط يمكننا أن ندرك أن أعظم ما بلغته البشرية كان نتيجة مباشرة للمعرفة. نتحدث هنا عن تلك المعرفة التي تحفز الساعي إليها على وضع توقيعه الخاص على كل ما يحصله داخل المدرسة. أطفالنا اليوم هم عقول الغد، هم اختراعاته التي ستقول الأجيال القادمة أن تاريخ الإنسانية لن يتوقف ما دام في صفوفنا أولياء وأساتذة من يقول لهم: أحلامكم ولدت بلا سقف، لأن علمكم صناعة رؤاكم وجهدكم.
So 42 Abu Dhabi's learning model is a little bit different. We typically say that we don't have any teachers or classrooms or lectures. The traditional model of education within 42 is that of collective learning or peer-to-peer methodology. So it's interesting, there's actually a saying where if you want to go fast, you go by yourself, but if you want to go far, you go with a group.
الفرق في التعليم في 42 عن الجامعات مثلاً أن الطالب يتعلم عن طريق الممارسة، فهالشي يخلي المعلومة تتركز في مخ الطلاب ونحن نتعلم من الزملاء، وهالشي بعد بيفيدنا في الشغل إن شاء الله في المستقبل.
皆さんこんにちは。僕の名前はアブドゥル・アルホーサニーです。19歳です。今は日本の東海大学で国際学科を勉強しています。أطلق الشيخ محمد بن زايد برنامج يتيح للطلبة المواطنين بدراسة اللغة اليابانية في المدرسة اليابانية في أبو ظبي، وأنا وزميلي عبد الله المنصوري كنا من أول الطلاب.
اللي شجعني والله الأهل يتم الفرصة أن يسجلوني في المدرسة اليابانية في أبو ظبي. بديت منها في الروضة لحد الصف التاسع مع طلاب يابانيين وفي منهم مواطنين.
دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة تاحت لنا الفرصة لتكملة المرحلة الثانوية في اليابان. تجربة فريدة من نوعها وتشجعك على الاعتماد على النفس.
والحمد لله من بين 40 طالب أنا وزميلي عبد الله الوحيدين الإماراتيين في الصف وحسين بفخر.
بداية بعثتي لليابان كانت صعبة بالنسبة لي، خصوصاً لأن كان عمري 15 سنة، ولكن الأهل ما قصروا ووقفوا معاي لمواجهة الصعوبات.
We are preparing students for jobs that don't yet exist. There are tons of jobs today that didn't exist 5 years ago. So it's not about learning for a specific position or a skill set that may be for a position that exists today, because by the time they graduate, that position is not going to be there. It's going to be irrelevant. And so it's about preparing the mindset, the methodology for this fast-paced world. With independent learning, the students really are seeking to find out the answers. Whereas with classroom learning, usually the theory is given to you, and then the student has to extrapolate that theory into potential applications. I don't think one or the other is the right way to approach it. I think both actually is a combination that would make for a better, well-rounded learner.
الطلاب من صغرهم الحين يتعلمون عن التكنولوجيا، فهذا يثبت أن الأجيال الجديدة بتكون وايد متطلعة للتكنولوجيا ووايد مواكبة للعصر.
ساهمت التكنولوجيا في التعليم بشكل ملحوظ، حيث صارت جميع المعلومات متوفرة بين يديه بضغطة زر، صار بإمكان الطالب التعلم في أي مكان وزمان.
تخصصي هو الهندسة الكهرباء، منها هندسة الروبوتات، فحاب إني أدرس عن هالموضوع أكثر وأكثر، وحابين أن نسبق أغلب الدول بالتكنولوجيا.
So the UAE is actually very different from other countries I've learned in, and it's, you know, the collective intelligence and being able to work in groups is actually very interesting. And that's very different where other countries may feel like it's a competition, or they may feel they need to, you know, oh, if they succeed, I can't succeed. Here it's much more family oriented, community oriented, and it's a beautiful thing to see.
أنا الحقيقة مرتاح جدا أن نفتخر شبابنا وهذا الجيل الناشئ الآن اللي هو جيل العلم والفقاهة والثقافة.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سمو الشيخ حامد بن زايد آل نهيان عضو المجلس التنفيذي لإمارة أبو ظبي، سمو الشيوخ أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، الحضور الكريم، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أحب أعرفكم بنفسي، أختكم العنود الكعبي، مديرة البرامج التعليمية في مكتب شؤون التعليم. شرفني اليوم أن أتولى مهمة إدارة هذا الحوار في هذا المجلس الكريم في محاضرة تحمل عنوان التعليم والتعلم معا نحو التقدم الإيجابي، يلقيها مايكل هورن، محاضر في جامعة هارفارد، وله العديد من المؤلفات والكتب في مجال الابتكار والتعليم. سنستمع في هذه المحاضرة لنظرة مختلفة لآلية التعليم تحفز التعاون والتفاعل الاجتماعي للطلاب والمعلمين وحتى أولياء الأمور. نلفت عنايتكم إلى أن المحاضرة ستكون باللغة الإنجليزية، بإمكانكم استخدام السماعات للترجمة الفورية. اسمحوا لي الآن بأن أتحدث باللغة الإنجليزية. Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies, Ladies and Gentlemen, I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Michael Horn. Mr. Horn is a co-founder and a distinguished fellow at the Clayton Christensen Institute for Disruptive Innovation. He is also a lecturer at the Harvard Graduate School of Education and serves on several education boards. Mr. Horn strives to create a world in which all individuals can build their passion and fulfill their potential. He has authored several books, including the recently released From Reopen to Reinvent, Recreating School for Every Child. Mr. Horn holds a BA in History from Yale University and an MBA from the Harvard Business School. I would like now to welcome Mr. Horn to deliver his keynote speech.
Thank you so much. It's a true honor to be here, Your Highness, fellow dignitaries, educators, parents, students, members of the audience. I want to start by telling you a story. In the summer of 2020, in the early months of the pandemic, a friend reached out to me. He wanted my advice. He said to me, I want to send my children back to school in the fall. I want them to have that social experience, the joys of laughter and shrieks of joy with other children. I want them to be able to have fun with each other and develop their whole selves, to develop their social identities and be able to socialize in society. But then he paused, and he confided in me. He said, I'm worried that if I send them back to school in the fall of 2020, they're not going to have that experience, that the social experience won't be all that good. He was worried about students wearing masks. Would they really be able to relate to each other? He was worried about social distancing. Whenever his children got too close to another child, would the teacher reprimand his child and create some negative consequences? He asked me, what should I do? I empathized with him. I understood what he was going through. But then I paused, and I had a question of my own, which was, were traditional schools really all that social to begin with? And if you pause for a moment and think about it yourself, you may see my point. In a traditional classroom, we have one teacher at the front of the room with many students lined up in rows of desks. That teacher has to get through a lot of curriculum, delivering whole class learning. And the children don't have much opportunities to connect with each other, to collaborate, for the teacher to foster those relationships with the child and themselves and the other students. If students start collaborating with each other, we have a word for that. We call it cheating, and it's strongly discouraged. If a child starts to be social in the middle of class, they get disciplined. We don't like the class clown in our traditional education system. It can even be worse for some children. In the United States, where I'm from, roughly 20% of students report being bullied during their schooling experience. that traditional classroom experience just isn't built up to be all that social. Now, you might push back and say there's some exceptions. We can think about the children on the playing fields or in arts performances or in music when they get to be social. Or maybe you think about recess and opportunities for kids to have fun with each other on the playgrounds. Or maybe you think about time between classes in the hallways when children can have fun with each other. But all of these occur outside of the classroom. We call them extracurricular activities, which tells you everything you need to know about how being social is experienced in the traditional classroom. And that's because fundamentally, almost all education systems, all schools around the world, are built on a zero-sum mentality. They're not like the school we got to see in the video. They believe that for every winner, there must be a loser, and that undermines the opportunities for cooperation, collaboration, interconnectedness. Now, we might say that this was a worthwhile trade-off, that it's okay that schools are not all that social, because school is really for the academics. It's for learning, after all. But if that's our strategy, to make that trade-off, it's not working all that well. Around the world, there is no country in which all students are excelling and fulfilling their human potential. In the majority of countries, we leave countless students behind. In the zero-sum education system that I described, there are many more losers than there are winners. In the United States, where I'm from, only 1/3 of 12th grade students are proficient in math and reading. This zero-sum education system that systematically undermines collaboration, systematically undermines cooperation, systematically undermines interconnectedness, is not only limiting the social development of our children, it's limiting their academic development as well. Now, the good news is we know how to solve this. We know how to move toward a positive sum system in which we get out of this zero-sum competition, and for every winner, it lifts all boats. The pie gets larger as students succeed. And the secret is to start with a guarantee of mastery for every single child. Now, I have a puzzle to put to you. We have known for decades through anecdotal evidence that every individual learns at different speeds from everyone else. We have jagged profiles, we have different learning needs at different times. We don't all learn at the same rate, on the same day, in the same path, or the same pace. I have identical twin daughters who are here today, and I can tell you that they don't learn at the same way, at the same pace either. They're individuals like we all are. Over the last 20 or 30 years, cognitive science research has increasingly caught up to what we always knew anecdotally. And there's mountains of evidence for why we have these different learning needs at different times and why we learn at different rates. We have different working memory capacities. We have different aptitudes. We develop different strengths. We have these jagged profiles that shift themselves over time. What grabs us one day may be less interesting to us another. Knowing this, knowing that we all learn at different paces, that we all learn at different pathways, despite knowing this, through no fault of anyone here, we have built throughout the world an education system in which it is expected that a teacher will deliver the same content, the same learning experiences to every single child in the same way every single day based on their age. And then we act surprised when out the other end, they come out with what educators often call the Swiss cheese problem. Students develop holes in their learning because when you're learning something and it's a 3-week unit, if you haven't quite fully mastered it, too bad, the class is moving forward, and you develop a hole in your learning. Now, conversely, the opposite is also true. Some people already master something much quicker than the 3 weeks, and they grow bored with their schooling experience. In both cases, we have built failure into the system by its very design. We have embedded the failure rates that we see by having a system that is fixed time with variable learning for every single child. We shouldn't act surprised. It's architected and it does exactly what it was built to do. But the good news is if we flip that equation and we move to a system in which the learning is fixed, we guarantee mastery for every single child, and we allow the time to be variable, we can start to move to this positive system, this positive sum system in which students get to go through a learning success cycle, where we start to develop them as self-directed learners, where they get to set a goal, plan how they're going to realize that goal, do the learning itself, show evidence through an assessment or other means of what they have learned, reflect on the experience, get feedback, and then set another goal. If they have to keep working on it, then that's the goal that they're going to set. If they get to move on, then they set a new goal. Every single student going through this experience starts to move us toward that system where we embed mastery as part of the learning experience. And once we make that leap to a positive sum system where we guarantee mastery, all of a sudden, the collaboration, the cooperation, the interconnectedness starts to come to life. Because no longer do I worry when one student is doing well, because it's not at the expense of me. Our natural human desire to help our fellow humans can shine through, because we're not in competition for scarce success or for scarce seats at the end of the line. This is a picture from Summit Public Schools in California in the United States, and you can see the energy in the room. The students popping up, one who's already mastered something saying, hey, you're struggling with that. I was struggling with it last week. Let me help you. Students working together in deep projects to apply their knowledge to make progress together. Teachers bouncing around the room, helping those students succeed. At my children's Montessori school, it's not all that different. As the students work with each other through problems, help teach each other and learn from each other, with the teachers and learners switching all the time depending on what they're working on. So we can do this. We can absolutely do this. And it's not just about doing this process for that content knowledge, which is so critical, but it's doing this mastery-based approach also for the cognitive skills that people need to succeed in an ever more complicated and complex world in which we live. These cognitive skills are things like problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, communication, collaboration, and things of that nature. Things that we need to develop with the knowledge as we learn it. And having that mastery-based approach, that positive sum approach, can allow us to do it in the course of rich projects as we do our learning. And not just that, we also need to develop habits of success in intentionally mastery-based ways as well. When I say habits of success, other people call them character skills, social emotional learning, or non-cognitive skills. But what in essence I mean by it are things like executive functioning skills, planning how you're going to learn, self-efficacy, agency, being able to take ownership over your learning, and realizing your actions has an impact on the outcome. Things like grit and perseverance and growth mindset that we know are so important to each child's learning and their ability to be lifelong learners, forever learners, in a world in which the half-life of knowledge and skills is declining every single day. Now, I just want to pause on this point of habits of success because I want to contrast trying to do this in our zero-sum, time-based education system with a mastery-based positive-sum one. Because teachers all around the world have embraced the importance of these habits of success. They talk often to students about, I'll just use one example, growth mindset. This notion that your intelligence is not fixed, that you have the ability to get smarter by working harder. But in the traditional education system, it systematically undermines that message. Because I might be in the middle of a 3-week unit, I don't master everything at the end of that 3-week unit. I take a test, and maybe I get a C, and all of a sudden I've been labeled. I've received a label that I can't change easily. It's become fixed to me. And so the teacher might talk about growth mindset, but the system is sending a different message, that my abilities are fixed. And I will tell you that far more than listening what we say, children watch what we do. Actions speak far louder than words. It's not just growth mindset. I'll give you one more example. Perseverance or grit, the importance of working hard and that effort will lead to positive implications. In the traditional system, we say it actually doesn't really matter how hard you work because at the end of the 3 weeks, you get to make progress and keep moving forward. In a mastery-based system, you have to keep working at something until you master it to make progress. And we say it's okay if you fail, because failure is a step on the path to mastery. It's not an end destination in and of itself. We also get to build in real-world experiences and the cultivation of social capital, which are so critical to life success and life opportunity. Intentionally using the world around us to bring it into the school community, to bring in community members, to tackle real-world projects in the context of the learning, to make those knowledge, skills, and habit success all the more relevant to the learners themselves. And we get to foster the creation of mentorship and social capital so that people can widen the opportunity of who they know. Because a lot of research shows us that once you get to a baseline of what you know, who you know is what leads to opportunity. And we get to do this on a foundation of health and wellness and social emotional well-being so that students can succeed. And when we move to this positive sum education system, all of a sudden we unlock all these opportunities because it's in my interest as a student that you are happy and healthy and well so that you can succeed in your studies. We change the incentives for every single individual in the system. Now, this might sound like a lot of work for teachers. Teachers are already stressed. They have a number of things on their plates. Indeed, there was a movie many years ago, Waiting for Superman, and I think the biggest problem with the movie was the implication that all of our millions of teachers around the globe have to be superheroes in order for our students to succeed. We ask teachers to do so many things, from content delivery to managing a class, to assessing students, to grading them, to mentoring them, to helping them with their mental and social health and well-being, to help connecting things to outside opportunities and real-world projects, to using data to make decisions. I haven't even scratched the surface, I suspect. There are so many tasks for teachers. So am I really asking for one more of guaranteeing mastery? I think the big shift that we need to make is to team teaching, co-teaching, where teachers get to be with other teachers in the classrooms with, yes, more students, but they get to bounce off each other, develop their own skill sets, get recognition from other adult peers to create a more interconnected learning environment where students are not islands unto themselves with one teacher, but there's more support for each teacher so that if I really love to dig deep on data and another teacher wants to spend a lot more time on one-on-one tutoring, we can develop those passions and strengths so that children have a web of support and the teachers have a web of support as well. In some ways, we can allow for teachers to spend far more time in these one-on-one relationships with students, cultivating small group learning, cultivating students to work with each other. And when a teacher jumps over to spend one-on-one time with the class, it's not like the other students are getting neglected, because in a team teaching environment, we have so many more adults in the room to help those other students. In many ways, the theory of changing education, of reforming education for so many years, has resembled millions of students and teachers on a canoe. And the message we've sent to teachers is, you just need to row harder by yourself. But what if we gave many more people oars alongside them? Their fellow teachers in an environment with them, but also the students, through the agency and ownership of their own learning in that self-directed learning cycle I showed before, where the students get to set the goals, plan how they'll learn, do the learning, and be active learners in it, which research has shown is so critical to developing mastery. What if we give all those individuals oars so that we can do this together, make positive progress together? Now, parents are part of this equation as well. Every parent I know wants the best for their children, and a friend of mine, Alejandro Gibistagak, is fond of saying, students only spend 13% of their waking hours in their classroom. So there's a whole bunch of time when they're awake and learning outside of school that their parents are far more on top of than any school or teacher could be. How would we harness those relationships more to create that interconnected support and positive progress? Schools can start to spend more time with helping parents as they read with their children, as they have conversations with them, as they foster that growth mindset and so forth as well. But parents also have expectations on the schools. Colleagues of mine did some research about why are so many families switching schools right now. And what they found is that there's a bucket of reasons that cause anyone to change schools that tend to go together. But you can sum up these multifaceted reasons in 4 different groups. The first one were parents that saw that their child was in trouble. They were falling behind academically, maybe they were getting bullied at school, something like that, and they wanted to help their child get back on track. And so they would pick a new school. Other parents would switch schools because they wanted their child to be among a like-minded group of individuals. It would be a safer place for them to learn at that time in their lives. Another group has been switching because they said, you know, the academic knowledge is good enough for my child right now. What I really want is for them to be developing the whole child, focusing on the social, emotional parts of their well-being and learning. And then a fourth group said, nuh-uh, I just want the school to follow my plan for my child to help them get great test scores and university admissions and things like that. We don't need to judge any of these 4 groups because the reality was any given parent often cycled through different parts of these quests for progress in their own right as they made changes to their children's schooling. But the point is that it's very difficult for any given school to serve all of these quests for progress on behalf of a teacher, on behalf of a parent. If you think about it for a moment, the parent who's really interested in those test scores and university admissions might be a little bit annoyed if a school is spending more time on the social emotional health of the children, and vice versa, to be fair. And so having a system of choices, even better, a community center type schooling that gives different schooling options within the community center and can customize for different student needs and different parents' desires for progress, can start to represent a leap forward in how we as communities start to create these options and pathways for students. And one of the really exciting things is the role of technology against all of this. Because learning things is no longer a scarce resource. As you go online, as you use technology, the ability to connect with knowledge, to connect with experts, is ubiquitous. It's all over the place. And the distribution cost, the marginal distribution cost, is literally zero. And so that creates tremendous opportunities to do all of this personalization and customization that I've been referring to throughout this lecture. Now, technology is not a silver bullet by any means. It's not going to be the magical answer to a child's development. And each school and classroom may have to do different things with technology depending on their circumstance and what their community of learners needs. And so I just wanted to give 3 pieces of advice, first for teachers in the classroom, and then 3 pieces of advice for those who are running schools or thinking about the system of education as you implement technology. The first is for technology to be worthwhile, it must save teachers time. If it adds work to their already busy lives that we've described, it's no good. It's not worth whatever it costs. It needs to save teachers' times on things that they're already prioritizing. Second, it needs to extend the reach of teachers, enable them to do more than they otherwise would be able to do. And third, it must help teachers develop a deeper understanding of the children that they're working with. If it doesn't yield more feedback or more insight, it's probably not all that helpful. For schools, more broadly, so this is both in classrooms and at the school level, technology must improve the feedback cycle for learners themselves and for teachers. So I want you to picture shooting baskets, perhaps playing basketball or kicking a football in the game of football and into a net. And whenever the child kicks or shoots, you immediately get feedback. Did the ball go in the net? And if it didn't, the child naturally makes adjustments and tries to do better the next time. Coaches, other students, other people on the team can watch that child's performance and give tips. Oh, your wrist is not at the right angle. You need to change the position of your elbow, whatever it might be, to help you learn more. Good technology should do the same as your learning, giving you constant feedback as that learner that enables you to take more ownership and figure out how to get better. It should give more feedback to teachers, parents, administrators as well, so that they can better help each learner. If it's an opaque box where we don't know what's going on, it's not going to be all that useful. Second, technology can enable experiences that we wouldn't otherwise have in the physical environment. Whether it's through virtual reality and simulations allowing us to have field trips to parts of the world and times past that we never otherwise could have imagined. You all could come to my hometown of Lexington, Massachusetts through virtual reality and experience the origin of the American Revolution. And children worldwide could come to your wondrous country through virtual reality and learn about the ways of life here. But also, we can do science experiments, things that you never otherwise would be able to do through technology, as well as connect with experts and courses and things of that nature that maybe you just don't have in a particular school. So a child developing a particular passion can go deep in that passion. And finally, technology should automate laborious processes that are rules-based and can be automated. Technology should never, ever replace a human being. Instead, it should enable educators and human beings to lean more into their humanity, to lean more into the things that makes it so wonderful when we get to connect with each other. Technology should free up time so that human beings can do more of that and so that we can all make positive progress together. Because our nation's futures, our society's future, our global future, and the future of each and every single child is what's at stake here. And through a world of cooperation, collaboration, and interconnectedness, and moving to a guarantee of mastery, we truly can develop that society in which we all make positive progress together. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the interesting lecture, Mr. Horn. And now moving to the Q&A session, I wanted to take the opportunity as a parent, and I think a lot of the parents here would share a similar concern. Our children are spending a lot of time on technology. We know that this affects their social skills. We've heard some scientists talking about how it lowers the attention span. So how would the reinvented school deal with these facts, considering that there is a lot of attention on online learning?
Yeah, I think it's such a great question. And I'll say it's something that we grapple, my wife and I, constantly with our own children. So I relate to the parents who are concerned about this. I think the first rule is moderation in everything. You do not want your children on technology too much. It's not worth it. Technology should be an augmentation that allows them to do something in the real world. And so particularly for younger children, 30 minutes a day? You know, if you're talking about a school environment, not much more than that should they be on technology. As they get older, you should start to give them more responsibility so they can spend more time, because we're also preparing them in schools for the digital lives that we all lead. We all access life through internet-connected devices, and so that preparation, I think, is appropriate and important. But even then, you want to be teaching about moderation and the importance of balance in people's lives, the importance of socializing in environments like this, and not living your entire world in reality through notifications on a social media platform or something like that can have such damaging effects for people. And I think what the evidence is starting to show is that it's not just, technology can be harmful for a subset of students, but the real concern, I think, is that technology starts to crowd out other experiences that are so important. And so when technology replaces sleep, when technology replaces us interacting and having a conversation, that's when it's becoming a negative, and we really need to teach and push back against that.
Totally agree with that. I would end with one final question. In the age of Google, the availability of information everywhere, some people would argue that content knowledge is no longer important. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I hear it all the time as well, that people say, well, just Google it. Why do you need to learn knowledge in school if you can just Google it? And the reality is, first, you don't know what to Google if you haven't learned some knowledge. On top of which, your ability to be a problem solver, to think critically, to communicate, relies on you having content knowledge. It relies on you having that shared content base that you can move from a novice to an expert in a field so that you can do all those problem-solving, critical thinking, creating for the world that we know is so important. But it's built on a foundation of content knowledge. And then lastly, content knowledge is also important so that children can participate in our society. You think about children growing up here in the UAE, knowing things about the history of the country, knowing about the culture, about the religion, about the language, is so important so that they can be part of society, so that they can be a professional in society, so that they have shared language. And so I don't know what the right limit is of how much of that knowledge must be shared, but there is an importance of some shared foundation so that we're not blocking people out who don't come from households maybe where they get those background experiences. And we know background knowledge is so critical to the success of individuals as readers, as individuals in the civic world, as members of society. And so it's absolutely true we don't need to be memorizing nearly as much, but having an arc of coherent content knowledge is still important, even as it's not sufficient for all that we want our students to be able to do.
Once more, thank you for sharing your valuable insights today, Mr. Horn. It has been a real pleasure to be part of this conversation. في الختام، محاضرتنا اليوم ألقت الضوء على نظرة أخرى إلى التعليم وأثره على الفرد والمجتمع والأسرة. ما هي إلا نموذج من مدارس الفكر المختلفة في مجال التعليم. أشكر سمو الشيوخ والحضور الكريم على حسن الاستماع، وندعو سمو الشيخ حامد بن زايد آل نهيان والمشاركين في الفيديو للصعود على المنصة لأخذ صورة جماعية.